Good evening, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, thank you so much for the honor of coming here, and I'm just going to carry this around. How's that? I have a 7-year-old, so please excuse me if I'm a little bit silly. Of course, there's nothing more silly than talking about cancer, right? Not at all. I will try to do my best to both entertain and educate and not bore any of you guys. First of all, let's start with the definition. What is a cancer survivor? Raise your hand if you're a cancer survivor. Okay. Raise your hand if you know somebody who's a cancer survivor. Good, everybody. I mean, not good, but that means this is somewhat relevant, right? So the American Cancer Society defines a cancer survivor as somebody who either has been diagnosed with cancer, period. No matter where they are in their diagnosis, disease course, doesn't matter. We talk about survivorship as though it's this grandiose thing, it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's unicorns and rainbows. Again, I'm a 7-year-old, so unicorns and rainbows is in my life. But survivorship is so much more than that because it's just the tip of the iceberg we usually think about. And I like this, what I found. It says, it's often portrayed as a triumphant experience, focusing on recovery and the visible signs of healing. Oh, you got your hair back, good for you. But beneath that surface, survivors can experience a variety of physical, emotional, and social challenges, which can be just as difficult as to manage as a treatment itself. So there's much more than just the tip of the iceberg. So you guys probably want to know, who is this lady? Okay, fine, a little bit personal story. My life began on the other side of the globe. This was me with my mother when I was about 4.5 years old. And we were able to obtain visitor visas to come to the United States and visit my father, who was a graduate student at the time. So I got on this little airplane and went to Texas, which is why that would explain a little bit of my oddities. Yes, I grew up in Texas. And one of the things I used to do when I was a kid was do experiments in my dad's lab. I didn't realize that at the time, but apparently the equipment is actually not technically child-proof. I didn't break anything, though, I promise. After that, I had a very eventful childhood, which I won't go into, but I ended up going to Duke University as an undergrad, and I was actually determined to become a physician even then. But because of that, I decided I was not going to study pre-med majors. I was going to study public policy and human development. Because having experienced some things that had happened in my own personal family, even at that age, I understood that healthcare and medicine is not just about the medical science. There is this whole context under which we have to practice medicine and how healthcare is delivered. And also, human beings are not just their biological, physical pieces, but also all the psycho, social, emotional, mental. So I wanted to make sure that, hey, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing medicine, I might as well learn all this other stuff now. When I was a senior, and I'd already been accepted to medical school, I started having these weird symptoms. And it ended up me landing up in the emergency department, where the ED doctor was basically like, why are you just coming here? Like, just, what are you doing? Anyway, that guy had diagnosed me with cancer. And it was like he looked at me the first time as though I was actually a person. And he was like, yeah, it's pretty bad. I think you can do surgery tomorrow. It's kind of emergency. And he was like, is there anything that you need? And I looked at him, I'm 21 years old. And I was like, would it be possible for me to borrow a phone so I could call my parents? I think he might have learned something that day. So I was supposedly not going to ever finish college, but I did because I didn't want my parents to pay where I was on a scholarship. And I was also told that I was going to start medical school on time. I said, yeah, I am because I'm just stubborn. So I went to medical school, I went to Mayo Clinic, and the reason I went there, I chose it over a very prestigious medical school that I was also accepted to that starts with an H in Boston. The reason I chose Mayo Clinic over Harvard, oh, I can say that out loud, was because Mayo Clinic had better health insurance. And I knew even then that my tumor was not completely removed because it wouldn't have been possible. And I was basically like a ticking time bomb. I had some struggles with that mentally at the time, because I didn't want to become a financial burden to my parents, because medical school, even with a scholarship, it was not cheap. It just isn't. So, and sure enough, it happened. It recurred. The timing was fabulous. No, it wasn't. It was terrible. And I had to do a few things like pass my final exams and take a really big license exam so I could become a physician one day if I could survive this thing. And I did those things, and then I went somewhere else to get my radiation treatment. I went to Mass General. I was fortunate enough that my physicians at Mayo Clinic cared enough about me to say, we can't treat you here, we're going to send you to the medical school that you turned down. Life is ironic sometimes. But I wouldn't have been able to afford to get a proton therapy at Harvard if I actually went there as a student. So thank you, Mayo Clinic. I couldn't finish medical school that year because of the disruption, but I got to do a little bit of self-care, which I'm still terrible at. I finally learned how to swim more than just the breaststroke, and I realized there were more than one strokes. And I also tried to go back and play some piano because it turns out that it requires a lot of coordination and it's really good for cognitive recovery. And supposedly I began to learn to listen from both ends of stuff. It's good. I had to figure out what to do when I finished medical school, and I didn't know what to do, and somebody said, well, you should go to pathology. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that is, but what is it? Okay. Well, pathology comes from the Greek pathos, which means suffering, and logia is the study of. And I think for all of you survivors, and those of you who know survivors, we have studied suffering. But the key here is, how do you turn and transform that suffering into something more hopeful? Well, now going to the nerdy part of my talk. Pathologists are physicians who are specially trained and to specialize in the diagnosis of diseases, which can include cancer. And what we do is we examine samples taken from the body, even if they're dead bodies. Yes, that is true. And I am a triple-boarded anatomic, clinical, and molecular genetic pathologist. I am proud to say the only one who's practicing in East North Carolina. So basically, if you go east of I-95, there's 41 counties, and it's me. I'm your oncologist, dude. Okay, or gal, because I don't know. I don't know what they say. Is it they? What I do is I combine my medical knowledge, my understanding of different types of medical conditions, my familiarity with even inherited genetic conditions, my understanding of cancer mutations, my ability to recognize what cancer looks like when you look at it underneath the microscope. I almost quit pathology because I was so freaking bored out of my mind, because I called my parents actually 1 month into my residency program, and I said, I am going crazy, Mom and Dad. I did not go into medicine to look at pap smear slides all day. And my parents said to me, well, you just got there. Why don't you stick with it? And being the good Chinese girl I am, I listened to them. And by the time I remembered how much I hated it, I was like, man, it's not worth trying to go back and do something else. Might as well stick it out. So I did. So that's how I became a pathologist. What I really wanted to do was do stand-up comedy, but I was not deemed funny enough. So what I do is I combine all this knowledge and background, and I try to make sure that we're using the information so that we can recognize the mutations so that patients like Sharon can get the treatment that they need. And what that looks like is, I'll walk you through the process, because probably most of you guys have not been inside the pathology lab. Hold on, how many of you guys have actually been inside the histology lab, where you have actually seen the cutting? Okay. All right, I guess some of you guys have had the lab people, okay. Of those who are patients, how many of you guys have been inside the pathology lab to see how they got the specimen? discussed them and processed them. See, that's all I care about. So I walk you guys through that, and then it'll be kind of interesting fun, maybe. Okay, so the flavors of samples that I mostly deal with are going to be either solid tissue or they're going to be like liquid cytology. Okay, so solid tissue. Let's say Sharon went and got her biopsy done, and it's a little piece of tissue. Okay, it's like a piece of meat that you get from birth. No. Well, we look at it and examine it under a microscope eventually, but how do you get there? So we actually have to cut it and process it. Alternatively, you can actually stick a needle or even take a little bit of fluid from, a pleural fluid, for example, and that can then be smeared onto the side, and all this can be stained. And then you have a happy, smiling pathologist who will look at it and be like, ooh, I think I recognize something. And then because we know what the tumor cells look like, we can actually literally take those tumor cells, scrape them off, and then test them for the mutations. But before all that, we generate this pathology report. Is going to be written in a lot of jargon that even oncologists can't always understand. So don't feel bad. Okay, so walking through that a little bit more. Okay, visually. Okay, I'm trying to not bore you guys. Okay, so you've got this little scalpel to cut what you want. It's kind of like a kitchen counter. It's kind of weird. Like you've got this. It's not always blue. The cutting board may be different colors, and you're cutting it, you're measuring it, you're inking it, you're saying, what is this? And then you put it in these little cassettes with little holes in them. And you should label it so you don't lose it, because it could be, you want to make sure it's not somebody else's, because you gotta know whose patient it belongs to. And then it's fixed and formed so that way that the cells are not gonna change and do weird funky things. Okay. It's actually embedded in this wax. It's called a paraffin wax. I know it sounds really weird. You gotta see it to believe it. That wax allows you to actually cut thin slices. And then those are placed onto glass slides. And then we stain them. And then it goes to the microscope so we can look at it. And this is how tissue is processed in the laboratory. So if you ever were curious, now you know. So this will be a really fun dinner conversation next time. And what I do is, because I understand this process and I know what cancer cells look like under a microscope, I also understand about molecular testing, mutations, I look at the cells and I say, hey, this patient sample is going to be enough, not enough, this is what we're going to do, what we recommend, and how we should approach this. I do this characterization. And the reason is because, as we know, cancer is caused by mutations in our genes, in our DNA, or in our RNA, changes in RNA, okay? And if you can recognize what cancer looks like underneath the microscope, then you can literally enrich a sample that can then be tested specifically for the tumor mutations. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. I know we're learning about biology and molecular stuff later at night. And as you guys just heard, well, lung cancers are probably the richest, you've got the best bang for buck when you're dealing with lung cancers, non-small cell lung cancer specifically. There's a lot of potential mutations that could be targeted and treated. But the key is, how do you find them? How do you get to that? How do you get to that place, right? We saw the workflow. It can be kind of complicated. There's a lot of potential gaps. But what you don't want is to miss it. And quite frankly, when it comes to where you can sit for testing, it's a little bit like going to a cheesecake factory. There are literally hundreds of companies you can send it off to. And what I say is, if you're a cancer patient, whether you get tested and where you get tested is a little bit like, it's random. Meaning, okay, well, you're an oncologist. Where did they get the coolest fabulous pen from? Who gave them the nicest sandwich? It's who they happen to know or remember, and that's how you're getting tested. And I feel like, my goodness, cancer testing is too important to be left to chance alone. So what I do at ECU in Greenville, North Carolina, in Pitt County, is I put my apply my medical knowledge and my expertise in genetics and pathology to help interpret the molecular pathology laboratory tests, and also help make those recommendations up front. And when I started about 5 years ago, the workflow was basically the pathologist would sign out the case, the oncologist would order the test, and it would get sent up. What would get sent up? Well, it may or may not even be cancer. It may or may not even be the right cancer. It may not even be assessed that has enough cancer. And results would come back, and good grief, nobody would know what the results are. It was kind of like random. And I was like, oh geez, you know what? I thought I went to medical school to become a physician, but I think what I need to do is just change gears a little bit. I really need to go and become like United States Postal Service. This is a joke, guys. Sorry, that one didn't work so well. Okay, I'm a very well-compensated secretary. How's that? What I do is review all the paperwork up front. I review all the slides up front. I say, okay, what's going on with this patient clinically? What tests do they need? Is this the best test? Is there a different strategy that we could take? So like, for example, yesterday, I was at work. Yeah, of course, because we're all working, right? I was at work, and I'm trying to get my work done so I can go home and pick up my daughter so she's not like, Mommy forgot about me again. Never happens, I just am always running late. And I've got these cases, I'm like, oh my goodness, do I do something or not? Because there were two cases. One was a case where, there were actually several available specimens, but none of them had very much tissue. And I was like, I don't think it's gonna be enough for the way that they had ordered. But if they send it to another company, it could potentially work out. So I figured out how do I find who's the person who ordered this, how to reach out to them. I'm trying to see is there any other specimen available. This happened, like literally the next case was the same. It was a very tiny specimen, a little bit of tumor, and they had sent it to a company. They were wanting to send it to a company where I was like, I don't know about that. So now I have to reach out to them too. So I'm like trying to coordinate this with multiple folks, right? And now I have to reach out to companies to let them know as well. So there's like so much different pieces of this. This is where I talk about being a very well-compensated, overqualified secretary. So when I came in, I began to review all of the cases. And then the results came back, I reviewed all the results. Because what I did not want was somebody to not get what they thought they needed to treat the patient. Because it turns out the physician that's listed on the paperwork could be the interventional radiologist. It could be the oncologist who happened to be on call at the hospital that night. It may be someone who has no relationship to the patient at all anymore. And I want to make sure that the person who's treating the patient now is the one who gets the results and they know what to do with them. I don't want to risk somebody not understanding important results. Are acting on something that's really not important, because these reports can range from anywhere from 2 or 3 pages to hundreds of pages. So just a quick example, we had a wonderful oncologist nearing retirement age, lung cancer patient, male, and he was concerned the patient had a BRCA mutation. When I look at a report, it's a BRCA variant with uncertain significance. What we do not need to give a patient who's already got this active cancer diagnosis is a new thing to worry about that should be worried about. So then I reached out and was like, don't worry about that, please don't. You don't need to worry about that. That one's okay. But then what if there is an actual BRCA mutation that could potentially be inherited? I do want them to be aware of it. Even if it's not for that patient, that means for the patient's family. And what I'll do in those situations is I'll go into clinical trials and say, okay, does this person have any brothers or sisters or children? I'm trying to look this up so I can then alert them, right? So sometimes I'd rather spend a lot of time doing this. And guess what? I'm not paying anything for it. I'm just doing it because I think it's important. But then I got a little bit of funding from an industry, an organization, a company called Lilly Pharmaceuticals. I applied for a quality improvement grant, and it allowed me to get some additional support, and I was able to actually create an actual order book. So anybody can order this, and you get Dr. Zhou's personal, comprehensive, very nerdy summary of the results and what it means. And it can be ordered at any time to say, hey, I gotta figure out how to figure out what's going on with the patient. What's the best strategy? Our results come back, what does this mean? And what I like to do is kind of like, it's sort of like playing Dr. House, the TV show? So like, okay, sometimes it's like patients got multiple things. Now how do we connect the dots? So I have to be a little bit creative at times. It's kind of fun. And then more recently, we started a literature report. So I'll just show a few stats. Okay, so for example, 2023 reviewed a total of 691 cases that went out for comprehensive genomic tests. 293 were lung cancer patients, about 185 were actionable, and then we found about 56 who had targetable mutations, and there were 22 EGFRs, and I showed some demographics. Okay. What we found was that lung cancer is more likely to result in an actionable mutation, which is not surprising, all of that. They're also more likely to get appropriate systemic treatment. That's good. And then also, within the lung adenocarcinomas are the most likely to get these guideline concurrent treatment, which is great too. What was really interesting was this. Okay, I'm gonna pat myself on the back, okay? We found a statistically significant correlation between patients whose oncologists actually specifically reference the results which I spelled out for them, and those patients getting the appropriate target treatment. I'm not saying causation is not correlation, but there was a correlation we found that if an oncologist said, oh yes, here's the results, because I literally would write it out for them, then those patients were associated with having getting the treatment that they needed. Okay? All right. So, a couple of years ago, I was at the Association for Molecular Pathology annual meeting, and it's the largest international professional society of pathologists. We're sitting at the board of directors meeting, and we're super excited about this technology and this new development. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, my patients, Eastern North Carolina, they don't even have the gas money to get to the hospital. We're gonna actually make this worse, because the more we develop new things, if we don't actually work on addressing those barriers, we're actually gonna worsen that gap between the haves and have-nots. And remember how I said that there's hundreds of companies that you could order from? And also that whether or not you get testing and where you get testing is kind of random. Okay, quick question. How many of you guys like to shop? Nobody, right? How many of you guys ever shop at Amazon? Okay, most people probably. I mean, you probably have heard it, right? So if you want to buy books, you don't go to Barnes & Nobles anymore. If you want to buy shoes, you go to Foot Locker, or Toys R Us. Are they even still in business? You go to Amazon, right? When you go to Amazon, what do you have available to you? You know what you're getting, right? Do you ever wonder, I wonder how much it's going to cost me? No, you know up front. I wonder if this is going to work or not. No, you have the reviews. I wonder how this is going to take. Oh, no, it tells you when you're going to get delivered. Our patients don't get that. It's not clear. You literally have to go to each individual website to figure that stuff out, and it's not even transparent. You have to search each website really carefully. What if we could create something like that? And what if we could create something where you could talk to somebody and be like, well, what do I need to do? What's the best approach? I think now there is an actual GPT-5 now. I mean, we all use it now. But at the time when I created this, it was not a GPT-5, so I was like, we're gonna make this a new molecular GPT-5. And what if it was something that you could have on your phone or your laptop? And then what if you coupled it with something that's kind of like an Amazon? Could we do that? Of course we could. It's all possible. Do we have it in us to do it? Here's what I envision, okay? You always keep the patient first, patient-centered care. You only refer medically indicated tests. To streamline processes, you have digitally scanned pathology slides. These are then going to be interpreted by digital pathology AI. Saying, okay, here's what we recommend based on our patient's insurance status, their geography, the available companies. Here's the test that would be most likely to be effective. Get that done, and the results flow back through the electronic health record, and then you've got the opportunity to get recommendations directly. And then streamline that process to enroll the patients in clinical trials or get the drugs they need. Okay, so of course on the patient side, you've got you caring for patients within a clinical context. There's psychosocial context. You've got the whole community around them, right? The community is important. Multidisciplinary care team, you've got oncologists, you've got surgeons, you've got radiation oncologists, and pathologists working together. On the back end, of course, all this is going to be useful to inform clinical trial data and also for treatment management sure that everything is aligned, and then we work together with cancer alliances and nonprofits such as Lung Cancer Initiative. You've got genomic databases, biotech, pharmaceutical companies, of course, all being part of this, and then molecular tests and drug development. So this is the vision that I saw, and once I saw it, I couldn't really unsee it, which is why I'm sharing it. So pathology, again, is the study of suffering. But how do we transform that into hope? And what I wrote in this paper, where I had to share the vision I couldn't unsee, was that it's through these collaborative efforts that we fully realize the potential of molecular pathology and oncology therapeutics for all patients. And to me, that is the key. It is all patients. It shouldn't matter where you happen to be geographically. It shouldn't matter if you happen to have insurance, if you're poor or rich. All people are humans, and we all deserve access to the care that we need. Thank you.